Let's do this. The Cult of Hockey podcast by the faithful and for the faithful. I'm David Staples of the Edmonton Journal, and I'm here today with Bruce McCurdy. Hey, Bruce.
Hey, David. How are you doing today?
I'm doing good, Bruce. I played in a pickup hockey game last night.
Oh, awesome.
Had a great amount of fun.
Mm-hmm.
Pickup hockey is always way better than league hockey. Like, it's just, you're not competing, you're playing.
Mm-hmm.
And there's a difference between the two. And I just like to play hockey. I'm not really into the competition.
I used to want to play hockey.
Who said that?
Rod Phillips. That was Rod Phillips paraphrasing every Swede and Finn that came over during the WHA years. That was his standard quote. I used to want to play hockey.
Why did they say that?
I guess it was, why did you want to come and play in Canada, or in North America? And this was during the very beginning of the Swedish movement, with the Jets and the WHA generally. But it was just kind of a standing joke with Rod and Ken Brown, was it?
Here's one for you, Bruce. Who was the first European born and trained player who ever played for the Edmonton Oilers? And I don't know the answer, so I'm not saying as you have Wheating, because didn't Whitey Whiting play in North America? Didn't he grow up?
I believe so. Yeah.
So who is the first?
He has a Swedish name, but
who's your guess on the first European player? It's a hard one, isn't it? Do they have any?
Well, I'm thinking of Risto Siltanen, late WHA.
It might have been Siltanen, right? Maybe they had someone on a cup of coffee kind of thing for a few games. What do you think? But I can't think.
I think it's a good question, is what I think.
Siltanen was my favorite Oiler for a while there. I just loved Risto Siltanen's game. He had one pretty good offensive season, but
53 points.
Got moved out before the Oilers became a really good team. I wonder if he could have hung in there on those really good Oiler teams.
He got traded for Ken Linseman, so it wasn't like they gave him away and just got rid of him. They got a good return for him, and then they later traded Ken Linseman for Mike Krushelnyski. So again, they got a legit NHL sort of trade tree going, at least until they had to move Krushelnyski to Los Angeles. That's why the trade tree kind of falls apart. But they got value for Risto. Let's put it that way.
Brings me back to one of my old pet peeves. Was Sather would play Al Hamilton at the end of his career was struggled, and he often would put Hamilton in the lineup and not instead of Siltanen. And those were one of my early rants. Bruce is an Oilers fan. I would rant about that a lot. Bruce, today we are going to be ranting about a number of topics. We're going to talk about Edmonton as a hub city, Caleb Jones talking about having COVID-19. Talk about some analysis of the Chicago Blackhawks from NHL stats expert Mike Kelly. We'll talk about McDavid and how he's going to do in the playoffs this year, and then we're going to go through some prospects who are near the top or at the top of our list in our prospect series, which we're coming close to wrapping up. Bruce, so Edmonton only has we're getting down to crunch time, and Edmonton only has 182 active cases right now. It was going up for a while. I think it's kind of leveled off the rise. I guess there was some expectation that the numbers would go up as we open up our city a bit more, but we're not seeing the rapid rise here in Edmonton that we've seen in the United States, and it's looking pretty good. The only concern that I have heading into this is, and it's not really that big a concern, but I haven't liked the NHL's new rules on COVID-19. I can understand trying to keep maybe individual players' names out of it still. I don't really think there's any reason. I don't think there's any stigma around getting this disease at this point. I don't know why it's kept secret, but I think it leads to a lot of weirdness and confusion and stilted conversations. But what I don't like is I don't even know how many people in the NHL, maybe I'm just not paying enough attention, but how many players coming in at Edmonton even have COVID? Do we even know that? I think they need to make that clear.
Right.
And do like the onus is on them to be completely forthcoming with that kind of number. Maybe I'm wrong. You can fact check me on this. Maybe they are. Maybe we do know right now how many players from the 12 teams coming here have it, but I don't remember seeing that number. Have you seen it, Bruce?
I've only seen number positive tests league-wide, so you can sort of assume half would be in each conference, but that's, it's only an assumption. And I'm not sure how much, difference it would make, if half is +2 or -4 or whatever, you're still, you're probably in the ballpark with that. But as long as they're given the right numbers and as long as they're doing the right things with the people who do test positive, then that's that's going to be the litmus test.
That's a good point. And like I have a lot of confidence in Dr. Hinshaw, who's been deeply involved in all of the preparations for the NHL. So, that's somewhat reassuring. I'm just going to Google latest NHL numbers for COVID-19. Let's see, latest NHL. I remember a couple of weeks ago we heard about, so many positive tests.
Right. Yeah, well, there was a spate of testing, of course, done when training camps were first opening up. So
when I Google that, the latest stories I'm getting are all July 2nd.
Oh, wow. Okay.
26 players.
Yeah, that's the number I remember from
June 29th. So yeah, I don't think there's been a number since then. And it's now they're all back at training camp. Mm-hmm. So what's the number, NHL? That's my question. And maybe I'm not trying to make a big deal out of this. I'm just saying, like, what is the number? Let's hear it. And there's an onus on you, NHL, to tell us how many people who have tested positive, or active cases are coming in. If there's going to be, I don't know if there's going to be active cases coming in if they just stay home, those guys, and come in later. I don't know how that's going to work. But that's the kind of thing that the onus is on the NHL to tell us, I think, because people in Edmonton want to know that, and I think have a right to know that. I really did like the way Caleb Jones handled his positive test. He was just very forthright in saying, he got this a couple weeks ago when he was tested. When he came to Edmonton, he was tested. He had no idea that he had it, and he didn't ever have any major symptoms. But I think that's the way, if players have it, they speak freely about having it. It's not a big deal, and it kind of shuts down all the rumor mongering, I think. Kind of shuts down all the nasty chatter, blah, 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 about someone's politics or someone's whatever, they're this or that about them. Just he had it, it's done, move on. It's not a big deal. And you make it a bigger deal when you keep it secret. So
he went through the 14 days and now he's been cleared, and he was nearing the end of that when he was sort of had limited access, and now he's reached the end of it and it's cleared. And he, the afflicted party telling us himself as to what happens and where he stands and how he feels and so on. I agree that's sort of the high road, and we've seen that from the beginning, various celebrities and so on sort of releasing the information saying, I tested positive, or, Tom Hanks being an early example, and Rita Wilson, where they said we tested positive and we sort of kept people abreast of what's going on. And otherwise, the NHL's policy of at least I think this is their policy of telling you numbers, but not giving you specifics as to who and so on, and kind of being a little bit closed-mouthed about why people are out to this unfit to play sort of umbrella reason for why people aren't available without really telling you anything. It's very different than that one situation we had where Austin Matthews was outed without his own. He subsequently has talked about it, and good on him for sort of clarifying things. But that was, to me, a case of how things really shouldn't be done. But ideally, you get the players themselves, and there should be no stigma. People get it, and it's maybe they did something wrong when they got it. They went to a party or something, but you don't necessarily get those details. But
it's usually family gatherings, right? That's what we know. It's usually big, at least at Edmonton, it's been huge family gatherings that people get it. So if someone went to a family gathering and got sick, how horrible is that? be careful at your family gatherings, that said, because that is the main way people get it. You know, sharing food at a family gathering apparently is the number one vector right now in our part of the world, at least. You know, so this whole thing is playing out in Chicago, Bruce, because Corey Crawford is out and no one knows why.
Right.
They're all guessing, like they're having this like weird guessing game in Chicago because no one knows what's up with this player. What we do know is he did not train with the team during, is it phase 1? Are we now in phase 2? Okay, is that it?
We're in phase 3 now.
Okay, during phase 2, when the players returned to their teams, he didn't return. He wasn't there, and he didn't practice. And he's there now. We're in phase 3, and we're almost a week into phase 3, and he's nowhere to be seen. And in Chicago, there's this weird conversation, of course, because on Chicago Blackhawks Twitter, which is pretty active, there's lots of fans who don't think he's any good anymore, who are really, it's so funny, Bruce. It is so funny. There's this huge debate. Is one of the two debates around Corey Crawford is what's going on with him? Will he be back? And well, are we better off without him anyway? And there's a sizable faction of fans in Chicago who actually believe that the team might be better off without Corey Crawford coming into the playoffs. So Mike Kelly, who is one of the leading NHL analytics experts, and and really on the cutting edge, because he's using all of the. I think it's safe to say that almost like the people who are really serious about analytics, they're digging into all kinds of things that aren't publicly available information, and they use video analysis, like they use computer video analysis. I don't know how it all works, but they dig down into the individual. What's the individual doing on the ice? What's he creating? What mistakes is he making? And with goalies, they're looking at, okay, what really is, they're not just looking at how many shots he faces. What is the real shot quality of the shots that he's facing? Like, are these one-time, like, how many one-timer shots, how many breakaways does he face? How many cross-seam passes leading to a one-timer shot does he face? How many, screen shot does he face? And when Mike Kelly was looking at that and looking at the Chicago Blackhawks, he came to two solid conclusions. A, Corey Crawford is still a top 10 goalie in the NHL right now. And without Corey Crawford, this team, the Chicago Blackhawks, is, as Mike Kelly puts it, have virtually no chance against the Edmonton Oilers without Corey Crawford. And when I heard that, I got really, really worried, because that pushed all of my buttons as an Oilers fan about this team in recent years going into games that they should win, that they, where the other team should have virtually no chance and the Oilers losing it. Before we get into that, though, I'm just going to read you some of Crawford's comments, okay? So we can go off that. Okay.
Kelly's comments?
Excuse me, Kelly's comments. Thanks, Bruce. He said, quote, "If Corey Crawford does go and he plays at his best, and I think he was really good this year. I think he was a top 10 goalie this year. Then I think the Hawks have a chance to be competitive in the series. So now we remove him from the equation, and you are left with Malcolm Subban, who I think of goalies in the NHL is probably a bottom 5 goalie. And then you start going to guys who aren't in the NHL. The Blackhawks have virtually no chance without Corey Crawford. Crawford was the one, and Leonard when he was there, obviously, that was the redeeming quality to allow this team to be competitive. They're a good offensive team. They can score. You guys know that. I don't evaluate any facet of the game by one thing. I don't look at, your differential here or your shot total here means this. There's more than goes into it than that for me. But I can say unequivocally that the Blackhawks are the worst defensive team in the National Hockey League this year in terms of what they allow, where they allow it, and how they allow it. Then he talks about their defense, and he says, quote, "There's nothing to me intimidating about playing against that blue line in Chicago's end. They're not going to push you off the puck. They're not going to be physical on you as a whole. I think they're a light team to play against in that sense. I don't think that other teams come in worried about having space in the offensive zone or winning battles. Teams are able to funnel pucks into the quality scoring areas of the ice easier against Chicago than anybody else. Create these chances, go across the dots, create these lateral plays. And when you end up with expected goals, which is basically grade A chances for traditional hockey fans, they give up a ton. What do you think, Bruce?
Well, I think grade A chances has gone from sort of our little code to traditional hockey analysis now. That's progress. But yeah, expected goals are sort of they're a derivative of that. I mean, you don't expect all grade A chances to go in the net. You expect but a percentage of them, and they're it is it's another way of measuring just the quality of the shot. It doesn't necessarily measure the quality of the shooter, as you know. I mean, you want to have Alex Ovechkin or Patrick Laine or Leon Draisaitl taking that shot as opposed to
Josh Archibald.
Yeah, exactly. Thank you. Yeah, well, there's a long list of guys you don't want taking the shot, but
David Staples versus McCurdy. Yeah,
exactly. So, but as for Crawford, I mean, of the list of goalies who played 35 plus games this year, which is basically half of most teams played around 70 games, and Crawford and Mikko Koskinen were tied for sixth in among those goalies with a .917 save percentage this year. That's 30 goalies that play, basically one per team that played 35 games. And they were both tied for sixth at .917. And Koskinen, that was very good. For Crawford, probably even better because he was playing behind a notably suspect defense. And of course, Chicago is really painting themselves into a corner, having traded Robin Lehner. And if there's any issues with Corey Crawford, well, they're already a team that may be in that category that says, well, if you lose the play-in round, you have a 1 in 8 chance at getting Alexis Lafreniere. And if you win the play-in round, you have a 1 in 16 chance of winning the Stanley Cup, assuming you're as good as the other teams, which clearly they are not. That a loss in the play-in round is not in the worst interest of Chicago Blackhawks in the long term. Let's put it that way. So something something as central as losing their goalie is catastrophic on the one level, and on the other level, it kind of clarifies things.
When I was thinking, when he was describing the defense, Bruce, and you might have had the same experience, I totally flashed back to the Oilers of 2009 to 2015. He was describing to a T exactly what was wrong with the Edmonton Oilers in that era. Just all of these ineffectual defensemen who could not stop the cycle if their hockey careers depended on it, which it did. And they couldn't stop the cycle. The teams would just come in and smother us and get all of these great chances in the end. And I don't remember when I was watching the Hawks this year, I think beat the Oilers two games out of 3. I don't remember seeing that, feeling that. But if that's the case with Chicago Blackhawks, I mean, that's just imagine, I mean, the dynamite line going in there and putting, with the way those guys can play hockey, and having that kind of defense against them, it on the one level it's encouraging. On the other level, everything Kelly said just scared the hell out of me, because it was up until that moment I was thinking, I think the Oilers are quite a bit better team, but and again would win, like if they played 4 times, they would win 3 out of the 4 times that they played. But when Kelly started to talk this way, it just felt like a jinx on the Oilers. In that moment, I was just like, oh God, this is the last thing I want to hear, because it's so fraught. Anything can happen in such a short series. I mean, Patrick Kane could get hot. The Oilers goalies could get weak, have some bad games. The puck could bounce the wrong way. And and the Oilers have had a historic, I don't know, like you'd have to go over this, but it just seems to me there's been so many times when they've come into games against weak teams that we should be beating with the backup goalie in net, where the Oilers lose. Now, maybe statistically that's not even borne out by what actually happened,
Well,
but that's how it feels.
How many games in the last 15 years have the Oilers been favored, period? Maybe 20%? You know, I mean, they've been in the lower end of the league. That sort of assuming that they should beat anyone is almost a foreign concept. But I mean, there are games, but I think some of that. I mean, any given Sunday, as they say in the NFL, and hockey is much more fraught to, bounces and randomness and luck deciding the outcome of this game or not. This is where the length of the series should help you determine who the better team is over the long haul. But there's a lot of randomness in determining the outcome of any individual game. I mean, you and I have talked in some of our podcasts, about two great plays, two blunders, and two bounces.
Decide the game every game.
Deciding a game, yeah.
Yeah.
So the bounces are a big part of that. In fact, I'd almost be prepared to put them first sometimes. The game is, one of the frustrating things about the game, trying to analyze the game, is the randomness factor. That's a very high in hockey more than other sports, I would say.
Except for soccer, which is the most random of all sports and is often decided by one call by the ref.
Why do the best teams always win then?
They do tend to, don't they, Bruce? They do tend to. Even in soccer, they tend to. Oh, Manchester United. They're playing in the right now, I think, against Chelsea. I don't know if that game's on TV. Yeah. I don't know why I cheer for Manchester. I think I've described this before. Like when the Oilers were losing, I was trying to pick a team that would win because it's just too hard to root for teams that are always losing. So I wasn't like a Burnley fan or something like that. Mm-hmm. No slight on Burnley, which I'm sure tries their hardest. Okay, Bruce, Connor McDavid. One of the reasons I'm bullish on the Oilers this year is I just think Connor McDavid and Leon Draisaitl are in the absolute prime of their careers as two-way players right now. These guys are ready to win, and they're in that and deter. Like I just think I do think that they're ready to go the full Michael Jordan with their teammates and kind of will the whole group forward, will themselves forward, will the group forward. And the Oilers are going to have that going for them. And I contrast that. I wrote a post this week where I looked at McDavid in 2017, and I don't think he was there yet as a player. He wasn't quite ready to be that guy in the playoffs, the refuse to lose guy. And we wrote about it at the time. I certainly did, and I think others did. I think you did. The 27, he got 9 points in 13 games, McDavid did. And I think that stat really sums up his playoffs. That's about, McDavid is a 15-point in 13 games guy. And in those playoffs, he was a 9-point in 13 games guy. And it was a big reason the Oilers were not able to advance in the playoffs because of that. And I don't think that's going to happen again this year. What's your take on then and now with McDavid?
Well, he's 3 years more mature. And, he was a great player at 20, don't get me wrong, but he's
MVP, I think.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, he's that much more mature. He's that, I think the team is more mature, and certainly the team that was built around him and them this year is that much more mature that they only have, a handful of guys really under 25, where McDavid is the fourth youngest player on the team still, but he's a 5-year pro now. So there's no reason to think he's going to have any kind of deer in the headlights moment in the second bash of the playoffs. And the same goes for Leon. And they're the drivers of the bus. So it's they're, I think, at the beginnings of their true primes. And, I think, but we're entering that stage where we can expect more than individual success for those guys. We can expect team success, and where, the measure of their performance is winning.
And I don't know, does Chicago have a Ryan Kessler or Mark-Edward Vlasic on the roster? They clearly don't have a Vlasic, who at that time, let's give this guy full credit at that time. he was a fantastic defensive defenseman
Yeah.
who legally was able to slow down Connor McDavid considerably. What a hockey player he was in that moment in his career. Probably the prime of his career right then. Kessler, of course, was a dirty, no good
weasel.
Thank you, Bruce. Who was the refs didn't call the necessary amount of fouls. They were enablers of all those negative aspects of his game. It was a sham, a crock, and a discredit to the NHL that they allowed that to go on in the playoffs that year. And he essentially mugged McDavid out of that series. So that's what I have to say about that.
I wouldn't call Kessler no good. He was very good at what he was very good. But he was he wasn't bound by the rules of the game or any kind of sense of fair play. Let's put it that way. I still have the vision in my head that time. They dropped the puck, and he grabbed McDavid under the thigh, and he lifted his leg up over his head and held him there for about 4 seconds, and the referees are busy going, that didn't happen. I mean, it was this blatant. I mean, if there's such a thing as 5 minutes for holding, that was it. They didn't call it. I had bad feelings about that series. Well, even before then, but from that moment, they kind of crystallized. They are not going to call this stuff, right?
Kessler was good. You're right. Yeah.
Yeah, as weasel hockey players go, I mean, he could play, but he was not an easy player to like.
What an embarrassment for the NHL that they allowed that to happen. What a bush league that they allowed that to happen. Totally bush league that they allow their greatest players to be thwarted in that way. And if that happens this year, it'll be embarrassing again for the NHL. Oh. Totally bush league in the hands of the biggest Neanderthal faction of the NHL that thinks that's hockey. So let's hope the NHL doesn't allow that. Are you worried about the refs here in Edmonton at all, Bruce?
Well, I'm always worried about the refs, but it's somebody asked me recently. I was on the Handkerchief Dynasty podcast, and they asked me if the reffing was, about the reffing. They're trying to sort of prod me on, and I was sort of saying, well, the reffing's been a problem every year since 1963 that I've been watching. In some senses, it hasn't changed a whole lot. It's a very difficult game to officiate, and some of the old boy 200 hockey men rationales that drive it. But it's got to be a tough, mean game. We can't give anything for free, so let's allow, blocking, tackling, mugging, and thugging. I mean, I think there's a better balance, and I've always thought there's a better balance I could find, and a little bit of consistency. That's the other sort of constant bugaboo that you can't really count on consistent officiating. But boy, oh boy, that. You got to the playoffs, let's showcase the game and the players. And to me, I'd rather see Connor McDavid skating with the puck and see Ryan Kessler hog tying him in a corner somewhere. Maybe that's just me.
And Patrick Kane skating with the puck.
Oh, yeah, sure.
And Jonathan Toews.
Fantastic player.
Yeah, Jonathan Toews playing hockey the way like all of these players. Let's see them play hockey, and let's see who wins the game. Bruce, we've been writing about the prospects, and we're right at the top of the list here.
Getting there.
So we got 2 more guys to go,
left.
And they are the 2 guys left. I think we can do our big reveal now. Are Philip Broberg and Evan Bouchard.
I just don't say what order, David. But yeah, the last two first round draft choices are the 2 top prospects, which shouldn't be a surprise, and really it isn't.
And they're 2 contrasting players, aren't they? They're very different hockey players, who both have the chance, I think, to be very, very good NHL defensemen. Certainly top 4 NHL defensemen, possibly better than that, possibly good enough to play like top pairing. Certainly Bouchard has the chance to be an outstanding power player. And but before we get into those 2 guys, you recently wrote about Lavoie. Bruce, what's your take on this guy and his potential, Raphael Lavoie?
Well, lots to like about his potential, and he checks a lot of boxes. he's a big guy, and I mean that's not the be all and end all, but it's you want to have some size on your team and some size on your skill lines. He's a right shot, which is it meshes nicely with all the left-handed playmakers that the Oilers have. He's a volume shooter, which is kind of a different uh, uh, for the Oilers' general style. Like he had 310 shots this year. Lavoie did in 55 games. Like that's almost 6 shots a game over in the queue. And now, obviously, as he moves up in class, those numbers will come down. But it tells you that his propensity is to shoot first. But he's not just only a shooter, right? I mean, he's got decent assist totals. He's capable of making a play. He's capable of grinding it out. He's got a lot of pieces, and he's a project under construction. From what I've seen of the guy, is that if all those pieces come together, he'll turn into a pretty fine NHLer. But it's going to take a year or two of additional training at the professional level. I mean, in his credit, he improved each and every year in the Quebec League. He went from 68 games to 62 to 55, and despite the drop in games played, each year he improved in both goals and points by a significant number. So his per game totals ramped up and up, and this year he was basically a 1.5 point a game producer. And the Q, those are pretty nice numbers. And now, he's ready to move on. He's played his 3.5 years of major junior. Time for the next challenge, and the next challenge, all things being equal, if they assume they get the season going, Bakersfield is the logical place. And whether he sort of takes it by storm and just takes a spot in the top 6 in the first power play unit, I'm not so sure, but I do know that he's ready to move on to pro, and it might take him a half a year or more to make the adjustment and start being a productive player there. But it's time for that next challenge, and he's a diamond in the rough.
So his potential is somewhere between kind of like James Neal to Alexander Giroux, kind of like kind of in there somewhere. We'll find him as a pro hockey player probably. Although Alexander Giroux was no slouch as a minor hockey league or AHL level scorer. He was
very good.
Fantastic scorer. He just couldn't translate it to the NHL. So, but that's the kind of style, the James Neal kind of power forward, not super fast, but big, goes to the net, lots of shots on net, nose for the net, and can make a play in the offensive zone. So let's.
Yeah. Lavoie is a big boy, and he's faster than he looks too. Like he looks a little clumsy. He's got a little bit of a funky stride, but he also has, according to people who've observed him, the ability to separate when he's skating with the puck, which is a real nice. Obviously attribute to have.
So the other player is Tyler Benson, and of course we saw Tyler Benson in the NHL, and I really liked what I saw. Honestly, when he got sent down, I was thinking, no, he didn't necessarily earn getting sent down. He could have hung in here. This guy can. He made some nice passing plays. He was good on the boards. He didn't give up much defensively. He didn't hurt his team when he was on the ice, and he chipped in. So, it'll be interesting to see with Tyler Benson what kind of player he becomes. He's never been he's put up some points consistently at the AHL level, but he hasn't scored a lot. I think he could be a third line winger. Like I think he could be a checking winger, because I think he's a very smart and diligent hockey player who could figure out, okay, I'm going to be making my bread and butter is going to be hanging in there on a third line where I get my 30 to 40 points a year, but I don't give up anything defensively. And I really am dogged in that regard. And I don't think that's an unrealistic expectation for him. I think hoping for more than that might be hoping for a bit too much. But he's got NHL level skill. And I think he's got NHL level thinking the game in terms of defensive play and moving the puck on the attack. So we'll see what happens with him. I'm still quite positive about him as a prospect.
Yeah, I think his cup of coffee was what ended it was players coming back.
Yeah.
Like I think most of the games that he played was during Casting's suspension, for example. I mean, once Casting's suspension was over, obviously he was going to get back in the lineup. So Benson kind of, his opportunity came when there was a shortage of roster players. So he got a few games. One guy started filtering back in the lineup. He got sent out, and in the meantime, he got those valuable sort of first exposure to NHL, uh, which it's going to, it's going to bode well for him the next time around. He at this point, this summer, he has a better understanding of the challenge ahead of him than he would have last summer. And really, David, we saw that with all three of the recalls, or the guys who made the Edmonton Oilers this year from the minor league system, in Ethan Bear, Caleb Jones, and Kyler Yamamoto, where each of those guys had a cup of coffee or more than one cup of coffee in past years. Yamamoto had two different goes at it. And those guys, I think, were way better off and way more prepared for the challenge the second time around. And I think we can expect to see the same thing from not only Tyler Benson, but a guy like William Lagesson, for instance. He got his first cup of tea in the NHL, and now he's got he's sort of got a baseline and sort of his own personal awareness of how tough it is out there, and what do I bring that will work, and what do I need to work on. And so that's an invaluable part of the process.
All right, let's talk about the two defensemen now, Bruce. And it's kind of interesting because Broberg has come into camp, and in terms of buzz around a hockey player right now, it's kind of Broberg-a-mania. Like, there's constant little. Apparently, he had 2 end-to-end rushes in a scrimmage yesterday, and he's wowing people. We saw this aspect of his game last year at the Summer Showcase, where he put on an absolute show. Now, he's kind of a controversial draft pick for the Oilers. I think it was 8th, or was it 8th overall?
8th overall, and Trevor Zegras went 9th, and that was sort of the contrast player that kind of became the focal guy of who they could have taken.
And there was also
Broberg, but there's a few of them. Cole Caulfield.
Cole Caulfield. There was another American that's more forgotten now.
Matthew Boldy.
That's right. Who didn't have that great season in first year of college hockey, whereas Zegras and Caulfield did. Mm-hmm. So I don't know. I was worried about the Broberg pick. No expert at all. I don't watch these players I don't watch them enough to have an opinion. Any kind of sound opinion when they're drafted. So I mean, I don't, yay or nay, I can't say at that moment. But after seeing him in the showcase last year, I was mighty reassured, Bruce. Mm-hmm. That this is a player who is just extremely toolsy. Like, he's big, extremely big, super fast. He is so fast, and he can carry the puck. He can move the puck. Mm-hmm. Now, is he a smart defensive player? Is he a smart offensive player? What is his hockey IQ? I can't tell you about that, but I can tell you that his coach on his Swedish team, who's been in the Swedish hockey scene for 40 years, was comparing him to the very best players he's ever seen coming out of that Swedish hockey system, and saying that Broberg's right up there with the very best. So that was encouraging as well. You usually don't say that about a dumb hockey player, like a player with a low hockey IQ who doesn't make good passes and defend well. Mm-hmm. His coach thought a lot of him. So I don't really know what to say still about him. We'll see how it goes. But he seems like a player, like kind of a non-conforming player, like Darnell Nurse.
I think Darnell Nurse is a comp for me too.
I think those kind of players confound a certain type of hockey fan. I'm gonna say, and these are hockey fans who really want their defensemen to be puck passers, and that there's nothing wrong with that kind of defenseman. Ethan Bear is that kind of defenseman, and he's fabulous. Like, you don't expect Ethan Bear to rush the puck up the ice, but rushing the puck up the ice can be a hell of a hockey play as well. And Darnell Nurse shows that. Darnell Nurse, I think, is consistently underrated by a faction of Edmonton hockey fans who don't like his style of play, even though he is really effective. So Broberg could be in the same camp.
100%. Yeah, Nurse is, for all that he has his detractors about his offensive ability, He's the only Oilers defenseman to exceed 20 even strength points in the last 3 years. Needed it all 3 years, and with at least 26 points in each of the years. Like there's separation between him and the whole rest of the D-core in terms of offensive productivity. And I'll grant you that it's not sort of your traditional uh, pass first or first pass productivity, but he gets up into the play and he makes stuff happen, and good things often result from that. And that's kind of the style of player I've seen in my viewings of Broberg, which included 3 live games at the Hlinka Gretzky tournament 2 Augusts ago now, before, at the beginning of his draft year. And he made a lot of noise here in Edmonton during that tournament. So when the Oilers did draft him, it's not like, well, who's that guy? Where'd he come from? He's a known commodity in the thing. Some people thought he went too high. Some experts thought he went too high. Basically, he went the same place where Darnell Nurse went in 2013, 7th overall. Broberg went 8th. So, in second tier of his own draft class. But the other comp for him obviously is Oscar Klefbom, who was a first round draft pick from Oilers out of Sweden in 2011. And in Klefbom's case, they left him in Sweden for 2 years and then brought him over and worked him in through the minor league system. It was basically halfway through his second North American season that he became a full-time NHLer. And that's sort of a reasonable timeline for Broberg. But what I'm hearing out of camp this week is he's pushing the envelope on that and raising expectations a little bit. So that's great.
I think it's good too, although I would prefer that he stays in, is he in Skellefteå?
No, he moved on to,
who's he played for?
Yeah, Bert Robertson's team. He signed. No, he's in Skellefteå. Pardon me.
He's in Skellefteå. You're thinking of
Berglund. Sorry, my bad.
So Skellefteå has lost Berglund and Jonathan Pudas, who they're top 2 defensemen. I would prefer. I'm hoping that he stays there. I think it would probably do him well. Like, he only got 14 minutes a game. I'd like to see him get 18, 19 minutes a game there for a year, continuing to develop there. I don't think there's a rush with this player. He's not. The interesting thing about Klefbom is, so Nurse this year averaged 1.17 points per 60 even strength. Klefbom 0.82.
Oh yeah.
Now
there's a gap.
So, people who wonder about Nurse's puck moving, well, he moved the puck well enough to put up some points pretty well. And I really like both these players. I think Oscar Klefbom was really strong this year and took a huge stride forward defensively. And honestly, if I don't, with Nurse, I understand the frustration when he misses a pass, and it happens. But
he ices the puck. That's a capital offense, David. When he fires a hard pass and misses everybody, and it's icing. Like, some people take that personally. It seems like. My problem. It's a weakness. He ices it more than anyone else, but it's not. It's not the end of the world.
If I have a worry about Nurse, it's the same with Klefbom. Sometimes their defensive play breaks down. For the Oilers to win, they need both of these guys to become shut down D-man in a top 4 role. And Nurse struggles with that sometimes as well. He can lose. He wins physical battles, but he can sometimes be caught out of position on a play, and he can go into defensive slumps. And they need both of these players to bring their A game defensively. That's my main concern with both of them. Because if Klefbom's playing smart defensive hockey, which he's done in stretches, man, he is really strong defensively. And then Nurse is both that and physical. So that's what I'm hoping for both of these players. I'm not worried about their puck moving, Nurse skating it, Klefbom passing it. They can both do that. They've got to shut down. They've got to be excellent defensively for the Oilers to advance. And I think they're probably both ready to do that. This year. Again, they're both in the they're in the prime years of their careers now as defenders, and this is the moment. And with Adam Larson healthy, I've got a good feeling, Bruce, about that aspect of the Oilers as well. They can really shut down teams when their defense are playing heads up defensive hockey. So let's see that, with McDavid and Draisaitl covering in the slot as they've got to do as well. So I'm a stickler on that, I guess, like maybe Dave Tippett is. That's what he, of course, would focus on as well, I think, more than
Mm-hmm.
as much as anything. Bouchard, Bruce, what do you think?
Yeah. Well, so far, pretty much as advertised. I mean, they drafted him 2 years ago, and he finished out his junior career with a cup of coffee in the NHL to start, which I guess that will help in the long term. I think they kind of got it out of order. They sent him back to junior. He went to the World Junior team. He ended the season in Bakersfield and was productive in the playoffs. So that was a real growth year for Bouchard. And then this year it was strictly all AHL all year long. And that too was a growth year for him. But I mean, this is, learning the ropes as a professional hockey player. And he's, uh, he was clearly better in the second half of the season than the first. And certainly his production numbers, which in his particular style of game, they are a measure of how he's playing. His production numbers soared in the second half, even as the team struggled. Uh, and he wasn't getting killed either. Like he held his own on the defensive side of things, and uh, good progress. I mean, for a first round top 10 overall draft choice, you expect to have a pretty good player, and we got a pretty good player, I think. But the story is yet to be written as to how good. Very different style though from Philip Broberg.
Yeah, if to make an Oiler comparable, I think Justin Schultz is a very strong comparable for Evan Bouchard. And
Mhm.
unlike Justin Schultz, Justin Schultz did play half a year in the AHL and he came into pro hockey a little older than
Did he
Bouchard
ever?
did. But you know what I like about the whole Bouchard situation is no one's kind of on the edge of their seat saying, like, when is that Bouchard going to make the NHL? Like,
Right.
even for next year, I don't think he's on. People are thinking, now maybe he'll be in the NHL. And I think that's really healthy for the Oilers organization to have that with a top pick like him, because rushing Bouchard to the NHL would be the biggest mistake you could make for this player in terms of managing this player. You could see that he needed that year in the AHL. He had problems, especially early on defensively. He's got some ways to go defensively in
Hmm.
terms of like he's not going to be big Bobby Clobber on the ice. He's never going to be that guy.
Right.
But he could be a very sound, fundamental defensive player who keeps his body between his man and the net consistently and doesn't get beat outside and makes the right reads in the defensive zone and in the defensive slot, covers his man. He can be that guy, and we saw signs that he was becoming more of that player in the AHL this year. His offensive production was good, but not great. I'd say for what's expected of Evan Bouchard. I mean, it was good, but higher end. You at the AHL level, if he was there this year, you'd almost hope for a point a game if he plays another year down there. He's Justin Schultz. The main difference is he's got a much better shot than Justin Schultz ever had. And otherwise, they're very similar stylistically. They look a little. Some people are going to look at Evan Bouchard and always think, "Oh, he's lazy. Like he doesn't," because he's got that kind of skating style, where it's a little. It's not churning and frenetic. It's more smooth. So go ahead.
Well, he's calm to a fault, Evan Bouchard. Man, nothing seems to fluster the guy. And I mean, that's a good thing, but there are times where maybe a little more panic wouldn't go amiss, in panic style situations. But he really does keep his cool out there, and he's got an extremely low panic point from everything that I've seen. And mostly that's a positive attribute. And, it'd be nice to see him, just maybe tighten up a little bit on the defense, be a little more, aggressive on the man and the gap and so on. But what is he now? 20 years old.
Yeah.
So you know, there's no show me a 20-year-old defenseman who's a fully developed product. It may be out there, but there's not very darn many of them.
Yeah, it's exciting with the Oilers with two prospects like that, and then the Oilers just their defensive depth chart is
Mm-hmm.
very deep right now because just behind them they have Dmitry Samarukov,
Mm-hmm.
they've got Lagesson still a prospect, and they have the two big tough American Kesselring and Kemp. They've
Mm-hmm.
got Berglund,
Mm-hmm.
Niemelainen. There's a lot of players there, and I can't remember the Oilers having that kind of defensive depth prospect, Bruce, ever.
Well, we've got in our top 20, actually in the top 17, 9 of the 17 are defensemen, a majority of the top, you know, pro, large number of prospects. I got 9 guys waiting in the wings, and that does not include Ethan Bear or Caleb Jones, both of whom graduated from this list last year. So they've got youth already on the main squad, and this is why they can afford to take a little time with even top-notch prospects like Bouchard and Broberg. Is there's not a gaping hole that they got to rush them into like they did with Justin Schultz, where, we haven't got enough guys in the top four. So guess what, Justin, you're it. And that's no longer the prevailing situation in Edmonton, that they can afford to take time and either break the guy in on a third pairing or give him an extra year in Sweden or Bakersfield, as the case may be. Let's get them up when they're ready.
Yeah, it's great. It's just great compared to the past. And we'll see. So players taken in the top 10 at about that defenseman, they have about, I think if I'm not mistaken, it's about a coin flip whether they become an average to good NHL player or below that. So it's usually a coin flip. Right now, though, you could still say it's a coin flip for both Bouchard and Broberg. I guess that's probably fair. I mean, there's nothing scary so far that indicates that it's getting worse. In fact, it seems like it's going as planned, at least, for both guys to become top 4 NHL D-men. They're both still trending in that direction. So, and I don't want to get caught up in the current excitement about Broberg at the training camp, because that means nothing. Almost nothing is what I'm going to say. I mean, we were all excited about Nail Yakupov, his first training camps with the Oilers and his first cups of coffee. Our first viewings of him, everyone was over the moon. So I just put that in this. I put that in that same category. Maybe it means something, maybe it doesn't. So it's nice to think about and dream about, but it's not. You can't take that to the bank.
Yeah, it sure would be nice if we could find a little seat in the corners and watch some of these training camp um, workouts.
Ourselves.
I mean, in the past, I've personally made a point of every training camp, every rookie camp, getting down and getting my butt in one of those seats, in the downtown community arena or where have you, and just watching. And that, unfortunately, is just not an option in the current environment. So we just have to take the word of what we hear. And I mean, I'd rather hear good things than not. I mean, Philip Broberg is wowing people. Hey, that's great news, but you have to put it in the context of, it's a, July training camp in a very unusual season, and he came in here wanting to impress people, and he's doing it, which is, really all you can ask for.
And I can't remember who said this, but one of the commentators was watching Ryan McLeod and then suggesting he was going to do better scoring at the NHL level than at the junior or AHL level, and I think that's, like, I'm not going to take literally that there was going to be higher points per game. Maybe that's what the comment meant. But I think they think they see lots of offensive potential for Ryan McLeod. But my proviso on that is these camp situations, which I think if you've got some speed and skill, that can really stand out, just jump out at you. Because we've seen Ryan McLeod in 4-on-4 games or whatever it is in rookie camp. It's just this huge rocket ship blasting down the ice, and you think, oh my God, what a hockey player. But Ryan McLeod kind of, he was kind of iffy, kind of struggled at the AHL level. He was good. He had a good rookie year, but nothing to indicate he's going to be a strong offensive player at the NHL level. Nothing from that first AHL season. It could still happen. But, it wasn't there that first year. So we'll see.
Well, I mean, you think Ryan McLeod, what we're seeing of Ryan McLeod in camp as what we're not seeing, but what we're hearing about Ryan McLeod in camp as he roars down the ice one-on-one with Darnell Nurse or Adam Larson, that he's seeing the same kind of defending that he would be doing in a game situation. I mean, the knock on McLeod is he's not necessarily willing to take the puck hard to the net to go to the dirty areas, as some people say. And it's a lot. Those dirty areas are a lot cleaner in exhibition and camp and practice situations than they are in anything resembling game. That said, I mean, to me, if you made the comment that Ryan McLeod might outscore his NHL equivalency when he gets to the NHL, that
Yes.
those are going to lowball
Yeah.
where he's actually going to be, I think that there's a pretty good case that certainly could be true.
And I think that's probably, I can't get in the head. I can't even remember who wrote the tweet, but I think maybe that's what they meant. So let's just, and I think what you're suggesting is Larson and Nurse are playing at kind of 80%, and the 20%
they're
that's
not going to put
missing,
him through the boards, are they?
yeah, the 20% is it's missing is that I'm going to put you through the boards 20%.
Right.
But that's the 20% that makes all the difference, right? Like, Adam Larson, you try going around Adam Larson in a game in the NHL, you are going to pay a freaking price. I'm really excited about Adam Larson this playoffs, Bruce, because the way he played in the final 2 months to 6 weeks of the season, that was an Adam Larson that everyone had been hoping to see, well, since his great performance in the 2017 playoffs, frankly. And if he can play like that, I mean, that is the prototypical NHL shutdown D-man that this team needs to do well in the playoffs. And if he can play that way, that's going to be huge for the Edmonton Oilers. And I think he might. I think he's healthy. He looks like he's good to go. So that could be exciting.
Yeah, he can put Patrick Kane through the boards, and you won't even think twice about it, right? So
yeah.
Anyway, that's the element that's missing. So anytime you hear the training camp hype about this or that, you got to remember this isn't hockey. This is training. And
I seem to recall some training camp hype about, like, remember Braden Christopher, like, there was a massive amount of excitement all of a sudden, and so this kind of irrational exuberance can come out in these moments. So we've seen it before.
Mark Habscheid, never mind Braden Christopher. There's a long history of guys getting hyped in training camp, and when push came to shove, he was a player, but he just didn't live up to some of the sort of ridiculous early expectations.
Yeah,
so you got to temper those. So
Mark Habscheid was a draft pick still in that era when we were expecting every Edmonton Oilers fourth round draft pick to transform into a Hall of Fame hockey player. So there was a bit of that going on as well with Habscheid, kind of that unreal expectation that Barry Fraser had set in his first 5 years as an NHL draftmeister, unparalleled success, followed by 15 years of absolute and utter mediocrity in the same role. So that's how it shakes out sometimes. Let's just hope that the new guys drafting for the Oilers get on a hot streak here, because that's what a franchise needs. And that's what they had, I think, frankly, under Peter Chiarelli. The hot streak that they had under Chiarelli, aside from Puljujarvi, perhaps, was real and was significant. And I guess the jury's still out, if you want to be charitable, on Jesse Puljujarvi as well. So we'll see how that turns out. But man, the Oilers drafted some really, really good hockey players in
2015 and 2017 were both very good drafts by the Oilers.
Yeah, and the other ones could still pan out. We don't know, right? Like there could be some, like McLeod, Maximov, Lavoie, Samorukov. These are all unknowns. Bouchard. Yeah, so we'll find out. But Yamamoto panning out, to me, makes me comfortable in saying they had some guys who knew what they were doing, and they got good. They were good, and they got lucky, and the right players fell to them, and they had some real success in those draft years. So, Bruce, maybe we should leave it there. Any other thoughts?
Yeah, no, I think I'm good. I think we kind of cover the waterfront.
Alrighty. Big week coming up, heading into a week Tuesday, the Oilers' first exhibition game against the Calgary Flames. So
only exhibition game will be against the Calgary Flames. So, and the Giordano factor is the only thing that's got me concerned about that game. But yeah. the NHL wanted to promote rivalries for the exhibition season, well, maybe if they should have thought about that when they set up their playoff structure and kept to the divisional format that they originally had, where rivalries are built in, hardwired. That was the whole reason for doing the divisional structure. But, hey, they went in another direction, so all I can do is whine and bitch about it.
Who would the Oilers have played, Bruce, if they had gone?
They would have had a bye, David, because they were in second
Ah,
place in the Pacific. This is what I've been kind of railing about the whole time. Like they were in
yeah, that's
position
right.
of the 8 teams that would have had a home ice advantage. The way when the standing stopped, 7 of them got a bye, and the 8th is the Edmonton Oilers.
All right. Well, that's a good point. I would have taken that bye at this point. I would have taken that bye. I would have
Yeah.
taken that bye.
Yep.
We'll see how it goes. All right. Thanks for talking, Bruce.
Thanks for listening, everyone.
And in the meantime, and in between times, this has been another edition of the Cult of Hockey podcast.